Just before we begin, I wanted to say a big thank you. Last video hit over 1000 views, which, as someone just starting out on the YouTube scene, is a huge deal and means a lot. Thank you to everyone who liked, commented, subscribed, or even just watched. I don't want to take up any more of your time, so without further ado, on with your scheduled video. Now, I have something I need to confess to you all. I am an Isekai enjoyer. In my previous video, I spoke about terrible OC tropes, and I recognise that by enjoying Isekai, I enjoy a lot of things I recommended against. But even I have standards. Isekai may be a trash genre, but that doesn't mean that everything should just be allowed into it. And so, I have garnered a list of my top 5 worst Isekai. And for anyone wondering what Isekai means, it simply means to be reborn in another world, typically in a fantasy realm when it comes to anime. Now, a fair heads up, there are a lot, and I mean a lot, of Isekai anime, and even whilst writing and recording this video, more are coming out. So disclaimer, I have not watched every Isekai ever, so this list will be heavily influenced by what I have watched. And don't forget to tell me your worst Isekai in the comments below. Now on with the list. At number 5 we have In Another World with My Smartphone. Have you ever wondered what life would be like without your phone? Well, good news. Even when you are isekai'd, you can bring your device with you. The entire premise revolves around our protagonist being accidentally killed by a god. In order to make it right, the god reincarnates him into the world full of magic and wonder, whilst allowing him to bring one item along with him. So of course, he chooses something really cool that would give him an advantage in combat, or healing, or... well, as the name suggests, he elects to bring his phone. Now, this could have been an interesting premise, but they also had to give him OP abilities, as well as his phone having a range of powers to help aid him. To top it all off, of course in this world, monotony is rare, so a harem was bound to happen. And get used to that term, because you'll be hearing it a lot. Overall, it wasn't offensive, but just plain boring. At number 4, I've placed How a Realist Hero Rebuilt His Kingdom. Now, I know I mentioned how the previous entry had OP powers, but fear not, this anime has none. Aside from a couple of episodes of action, this show was a snooze fest from beginning to end. The protagonist is summoned into a world where the responsibility of king is thrust upon him, vis-a-vis the ineptitude of the previous ruler. He then does paperwork. I can see how some may find the appeal of the realistic element here, that kingdoms are ruled by paper and not steel, but I could barely find the motivation to finish this show. Oh, and of course it's a harem anime as well, because of course it is. As inoffensive as it is boring, this show tries something new, but still falls short. Shinka Know Me is at number 3. Now, I must admit the first season was okay. Nothing too groundbreaking, and they really played it safe by relying on old tropes, but it was passable. I give it maybe a D+. Effectively, the entire premise is Ugly Fat Kid and his class are transported to another world. Ugly Fat Kid eats a fruit known as the Fruit of Evolution, and is no longer fat and ugly. Also, a gorilla falls in love with him, which, I must admit, got a couple of chuckles out of me. But aside from this, the show doesn't do much to stand out from the rest of the slop. And don't get me started on season 2. Any charm the original had has been torched off, the budget was far lower, and the jokes much lazier. Oh, and before I forget, yes, it's a harem. Number 2 is The Familiar of Zero. Now, domestic abuse is funny, right guys? Well, if you're a normal human being, the answer to this should be no. But unfortunately, the screenwriters didn't get the memo. The protagonist is summoned accidentally at a familiar summoning ceremony by this one girl we shall be referring to as Bitch. Bitch treats him like a dog, beats him if he so much as looks at any other girl, and screams for what felt like 70% of every episode. Now, a small spoiler here, the protagonist is effectively in a harem for the majority of the seasons, but does eventually get married to Bitch in what felt more like a case of Stockholm Syndrome rather than a happy relationship. It could just be due to my hatred of tsunderes, or perhaps a difference in cultures. But this show just rubbed me the wrong way the entire way through. Now, trigger warning for number 1. I mean it, guys, this one is just plain disgusting. Okay, you good? Good, let's continue. At number 1, it's, of course, redo of Healer. Now, I wish I could say it was at number 1 because it is boring or because it's badly animated. However, for those of you who know of this anime, you know why it's here. Every female character in this show gets molested by the main protagonist, whilst the show attempts to paint him as the hero, and I used heavy quotation marks there, due to his past. To summarise the plot, protagonist was born and gains the ability to heal others, with the drawback that every time it is used, he feels the pain they felt when they got the injury. So, for example, if your arm was cut off, he is strong enough to heal that injury, but he would feel his arm getting cut off in the process. Naturally, this leads him to refusing to aid the princess or the hero party, again heavy quotation marks, and so, in order to force him, the princess gets him addicted to drugs and forces him to comply. During their travels, he is violated by every member of the hero party, be it through sexual assault, physical violence, or mental torture. The party eventually defeats the big bad when protagonist decides to fight back, betraying the party and taking the big bad's power for himself. Using this newfound power, he goes back in time to the beginning, but now has all his memories intact. Now, I am all for a dark isekai. I loved Grimgar of Fantasy and Ash, for example, and I would have been open to the idea of the protagonist hunting down those that did him wrong and either killing them or putting them into saw-like traps. However, the protagonist doesn't do this, and instead decides to molest everyone. Seriously, I don't think there's a single female character that he doesn't either outright rape or manipulate into bed, including characters who were never part of the original story, so he isn't even getting revenge half the time. It is like the showrunners wanted to write a fetish story, but forgot that consent exists. The worst part is that the show tries to justify his actions by saying, it happened to him, so an eye for an eye, which is a shoddy excuse at best. I do not recommend this anime at all. Seriously. I know some of you are going to use this list to try out new shows, but I highly recommend giving this one a skip. And that is my list for the top 5 worst isekai anime. But definitely expect a part 2 as I continue to delve into the dumpster fire of terrible shows. I'm thinking of doing more in-depth reviews on anime and media in general, as well as finding some more positive lists, as I feel the past 2 videos have been a bit dark. Remember to like and subscribe, all that good stuff, and to let me know what anime you believe should have been on this list. Hey, it might end up on part 2. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.